They tried to rotate my house 10 degrees while I was out of town like it was a deck chair that needed better sunlight. No knock, no conversation, just a steel rig rising beside my porch when I pulled back into the driveway. I stared at it so long my brain tried to file it under bad dream, and then the foreman handed me a clipboard and asked if I minded a little inconvenience. That was the moment I realized people will reframe anything as kindness if it gets them what they want. I built that cabin 12 years ago, board by board, paycheck by paycheck, not some romantic weekend project, not a Pinterest fling, but honest, slow work. My father taught me how to set posts into bedrock so a storm couldn't pry them loose. I learned how to read a slope the hard way by dropping a hammer and tracing it down to the creek. It sits on the only flat shelf of my 8 and 12 acre hillside in western North Carolina, stubborn and straight where the rest of the land wants to tumble. I didn't pick it because it was pretty. I picked it because it was real, a place that kept its word. I work as a regional safety inspector for a logistics company, which is a fancy way of saying I spend my days making sure forklifts don't eat people's toes. It's honest work, and it leaves me liking routine. After a divorce that felt like being sanded down into dust, I wanted quiet trees whined, the kind of silence that forces you to sit with yourself and sort the messy parts. For 10 years, that patch of earth was mine, and the only interruptions were deer and the occasional storm. Then the Halversons moved in next door. Derek and Marissa, California light. Austin adjacent, everything sleek and curated, bought the empty parcel that dropped off the ridge like it had given up on gravity. First time I saw Derek, he was standing on a boulder flying a drone over my side of the ridge, smiling like we were already friends. "You're drifting over the line there," I said, casual as a man with a chainsaw on his hip can be. He laughed like it was a joke. "Sorry, just scouting light," he said. "We're going to do something special up here." Special, as it turned out, meant glass and steel and a boutique architect from Denver, 3 stories of windows, infinity edge everything. Fine by me, build your spaceship. Keep it on your side of the line. For the first few weeks, that was what I thought: their house, their problem. But Derek kept talking about the sunrise. He leaned on my fence while I split wood and mentioned breezy that my cabin clips the eastern view. If I rotated it 10 degrees south, he said we could all have an unobstructed corridor to the dawn. That suggestion should have been obviously absurd, but he said it with the smile of a man who thinks the world is a set of adjustable parts. "Structures can be repositioned," he offered. "Happens all the time." There was something in the way his smile didn't reach his eyes that should have made me push harder, ask more questions. Instead, I nodded and went back to the log. I thought, like a lot of people do, that neighbors are neighbors, that the right thing is obvious, that someone wouldn't try to move your home without asking. 3 months later, I flew to Knoxville for an audit. I left Monday before dawn and came back Thursday afternoon, suitcase and coffee, and the kind of tired that makes you skip small talk. As I turned onto my gravel, orange flags dotted the perimeter of my clearing, fresh tire tracks scarred the grass, and 10 feet from my front steps, a steel frame rose from the dirt like a metal skeleton. Men in hard hats measured beside my foundation posts, paint cans, and bolt stacks neat as a lie. I said, "What's going on?" And one of them checked his clipboard with the detached patience of someone used to being the hand that makes decisions. "You the homeowner?" he asked. "I am," I said. "We're prepping the lift site," he said. "House rotation scheduled for tomorrow morning. Halverson project next door contracted us to rotate this structure 10 degrees to optimize eastern exposure." He said it like he was telling me about a plumbing fix. My chest went hollow like an elevator cable snapping. "You have my permission?" I asked, "because there are rules in the world, signatures and deeds and common sense." He flipped pages, frowning. "We were told the owners had reached an understanding," he said. I called Derek. He answered bright. "Oh, good you're back," he said. "We meant to catch you before mobilizing. It's a minor rotation you won't even notice, and we'll cover the cost." Cover the cost, increase property value, cooperative development. The words were all polished, shiny candy. The truth was ugly and simple to Derek. My cabin wasn't a home, it was an obstacle to a magazine shot. I felt anger shape itself inside me, hot, ridiculous, precise. I took pictures, beams painted, marks, tire ruts, the kind of documentation you make when your gut tells you you might be on the losing side of something bigger than you. I walked up the narrow stairs to Laura McKinnon's office above the hardware store. Laura has a gravity that makes people straighten without realizing it. Silver hair, boots that make a point, and a mind that cuts through euphemism like a new blade. Land disputes are her specialty, and the minute she saw the photos, she didn't twitch. She asked 2 plain questions. Did you sign anything? No. Did you verbally agree? Absolutely not. Then it's trespass, she said, folding her arms and calming the heat in my chest with blunt facts. She pulled my deed spread the survey and called the county office. The permit the contractor had was for the Halversons' parcel only. There was no mention of my lot. If someone told the contractor I'd consented, that misrepresentation was on them. She wrote a cease and desist so fast it might as well have been a punch immediate halt removal of equipment notice of intent to seek injunctive relief and damages. Deliver it today, she said, and if they touch a bolt, we're in court tomorrow. We served it. For 2 weeks, the rig cast a long, ugly shadow across my porch. The crew didn't show back up to finish, but no one dismantled it either. It was a parked threat. Their lawyers wrote back in polished language about environmental symmetry and collective valuation, suggesting I was being emotional and that we could split costs because nothing says neighborly like billing the homeowner whose house you tried to move. Laura laughed once, not cruel, just surprised. Arrogant or stupid, she said, possibly both. We filed for an emergency restraining order. The courtroom smelled like old varnish and more patience than passion. Judge Ellison, a man who looked like he'd seen property disputes chew up thinner nerves, listened as Derek's counsel talked about innovation and harmony. When Laura stood, she didn't ask for drama. She held up photos and named trespass plainly. The judge asked Derek a simple question. Did you obtain written consent to alter this structure? Derek shifted and said, we believe there was an understanding. The judge's voice was a blade. Yes or no? No, Derek admitted. The temporary restraining order was granted remove equipment from the plaintiff's land within 14 days or be subject to removal at your expense. 14 days, a neat-sounding number until you watch it pass without change. The rig stayed. I expected compliance. I got patience testing silence. On day 10, Derek popped up in his SUV like a man checking the thermostat of fate. You're making a spectacle, he said. You put metal on my property. I told him we had given notice and that the judge had ordered removal. He clenched his jaw and said low and dangerous, this ridge will change whether you like it or not. Day 14 came and went. At dawn on day 15, a convoy rolled down my drive. Excavators, welders, a flatbed, and Laura's old pickup with the court order on the dashboard. Deputies came to observe, and the welding torches threw sparks like bright punctuation against pale morning. Metal screamed as bolts were cut, beams lifted, and the structure surrendered its weight to the flatbed. Derek barreled up furious, but Laura handed him the order and told him calmly that compliance had been requested and denied. He had forfeited his right to complain. Watching those beams come down felt less like victory and more like a settling a line that had been drawn held. By noon, the rig was scrap on a trailer. The earth churned, but my cabin stood where it had always stood, facing the sunrise the way we had both expected it to. I didn't gloat. There was a steadiness in me, a fatigue edged with relief. 2 weeks later, Derek sued me for $120,000, claiming destruction of property and construction delays. Pride, it turned out, was an expensive fuel. At the hearing, his argument curled into resentment. Our lawyer's facts were plain. The judge asked a question he'd asked before: did they remove the equipment within the 14-day window? Derek hesitated. No, he said. The judge dismissed the case with a click that sounded like a final page being turned. Outside, Derek caught up to me. You've made this personal, he said. I told him what had happened to my father's hands on those posts, and that business that tries to rearrange a man's home is never just business to him. He walked away, and that was the last direct conversation we had. The lodge was finished the next spring, a beautiful thing if you're into impressions and lines. From certain angles, their balcony framed a perfect sunrise, and from mine I could see a glint of their glass from the porch. An odd thing happened in the months after, though. People started asking about my cabin. Contractors and architects and visitors would peer down the ridge and say, "Who built that?" Not because it was flashy, but because it looked like it belonged to the land. People can tell the difference between a place that was placed and a place that grew up there. The twist I didn't expect was Marissa. Months after the rubble left, she walked down the slope while I stacked firewood. She stood a few feet from the property line and said plain, "I shouldn't have called it a shack." Her voice had no armor. For the first time, she seemed genuinely off balance. "We're used to changing things where we come from," she said, "where if something blocks your view, you redesign it." Here she added, "The land pushes back." A sermon, and with the dull thud of a sermon and with the dull thud of experience, was painfully simple. If you don't defend your boundaries, someone else will define them for you. Not always with malice, often with a spreadsheet and a line item, but the result is the same. So now I sit on my porch at sunrise, coffee in hand, watching light split over pine tips and catch the edge of a roof I helped raise. The lodge glints above the ridge, and the cabin cuts its corner across the view, not blocking anything, just existing. Sometimes people ask if I regret fighting. I don't. I regret being surprised that a man could see my home as a problem instead of a person, but I don't regret standing up. Here's what I want to know from you. If you were in my position, would you have fought the same way? Was I protecting what's mine or escalating something that could have been handled differently? At what point does cooperation become surrender? And when does standing your ground become stubbornness? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me your story. If a neighbor ever tried to redraw your boundaries, and if you liked this one, share it with someone who thinks the world is always adjustable. Sometimes it pushes back.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.